Good day, and welcome back to the Composition Submissions Part 3. So, sorry about the delay between Part 2 and 3. A lot of really exciting stuff has been going on in my life right now, and I'm going to make a separate announcement where I can chat about all that stuff. But we're going to resume. We have 18 submissions left, so I'm going to divide these parts up into 9 and 9. So let's get started. Our first piece comes from Luis Andre, and it's a piece that he wrote that is inspired by Chopin. He gave me a PDF for this, so I'm going to play it out and display the PDF, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So it's a really beautiful piece. I can really hear the Chopin influence in it. I've also talked about Michael Andrews before, but I can kind of hear some of that leaning in there, maybe even a little bit of Philip Glass. It's really traditional in a beautiful way, and it has some really nice moving melodies. I like how you've kind of established your melody in the beginning and then wandered a little bit and then come back, but ornamented it. It's very, very classical and very well done. I think there's some opportunities maybe in your left hand. I wouldn't change too much of the right hand, to be honest. I think it's decorated very nicely. I think there's opportunities to make that left hand a little bit more interesting, because right now it's pretty much just doing these root positions, with the exception of a couple chords that sound very nice later on, like your A minor and your B7 chord. So I'm going to show you a couple suggestions on how I think that this could be not necessarily improved, but maybe adding a little bit more color in that left hand to support the right hand. So just for a quick demo of what I'm talking about, in the beginning, for example, you have some basic root position chords that go F, E, D minor. Now, typically what we do is we try to avoid things like parallel octaves, meaning things that move like this, or parallel fifths, things that move like this. And the way that we avoid that is through proper voice leading. So that just means using different motorcycle. So what that just means is using different voicings, different inversions of these chords, so that we avoid those kinds of parallel unisons, octaves, fifths. So what we could do instead of is, maybe we would try this root position F chord, maybe we'd move to a first inversion E major chord or E7. Now see, we have this kind of nice contrary motion. Now maybe for our D, our closest D chord, D minor, would be the second inversion here. So in total we have this, to this, to this. Create some more interesting movements, so all together with the melody. Screwed up your melody, but you get the idea. Really beautiful composition, though. Definitely keep it up. Alright, so our next submission comes from Mad Hatter, and it's called Take Flight. I want to roll with that section. So, like the instrumentation, some really cool things. You've got the piano backdrop as kind of like setting your harmonies. You've got some strings, you've got bass. I like how you layered your instrumentation, so as the piece went on, you kept adding different instruments, and it was kind of a nice surprise hearing that electric guitar kind of jump in. I would say the biggest thing that I think you can work on with this piece is going to be your counterpoint, so all of the inner lines that you have going on. First off, you want to make sure that any of the counterpoint you're having is not interfering directly with any of the lines that you have already. So if you have a chord that's using middle C, for example, you're going to want to be very careful if you have any of that counterpoint also touching middle C. And the reason is, as your counterpoint moves around, it's going to begin to clash with those notes. So I heard that there was a section where I think you had some counterpoint going on in the bass end. That can be a little bit risky, particularly because you're trying to establish kind of a chord progression with a bass already. So it can wind up sounding muddy. The other thing goes for your strings. You have some string counterpoints that are going on that sound like they might be interfering in the range with the piano. So what I recommend is if you want to have your piano be that prominent in the mix, you're going to want to find counterpoints that stay away from that range. So maybe something like very high up, like a glockenspiel or something like that. It would sort of complement the piano's register. Or you can play between having things kind of come in and out rather than having everything stacked all at once. So if you have a counterpoint going on in your string lines and then you have a guitar coming in that's in the same register, you're going to want to either drop those strings out or have them do something different in a different register to allow for that space. I would also play with your mix a little bit. I think you can also create more balance by panning these instruments a little bit. So it sounded like everything was kind of front and center. I would see if maybe you can have, maybe those two strings are panned left and right to offer some more headroom. Have the guitar come in, and when you, like I've talked about with automation, when you have your piano that loud, it's not going to allow for a lot of room for the other instruments. So you're going to want to duck down the piano in volume once you have these other instruments enter. But nice job. Keep it coming. Our next submission is by Max Roberts, and it's called Excerpt from the Egan Superpum... Let's try it again. Our next submission is from Max Roberts, and it's called Excerpt from the Egan Superpure... I can't say this. I can't say it. Excerpt from the Egan Superpure... I literally can't do it. Let's just listen to it. Sorry to stop that one, but just for time's sake, I want to keep moving. It's really beautiful. I love the way that you performed that. I think I know what's going on in the piece because about 4 years ago, I was actually really interested in permutations myself. So for those who don't know, I think what this composer is doing, or what the super permutation is, I can't say it, is taking essentially a sequence of, in this case, notes, and showing all of the possible combinations of those notes. So if we were talking about C, D, and E, our possibilities could be C, E, D, C, D, E, D, C, E, D, E, C, E, C, D, E, D, C. those would be all of our combinations, and using them all would be permutations. So I think what he's done is he's used from C to A flat and select a little selection from those permutations to then play kind of in an ambient setting, alternating between C and A flat in the chords. So really beautiful, really nice performance. What I would say is I think that there's kind of two philosophies. So with minimalist music like Philip Glass, Steve Reich, the goal was to create pieces that had as minimal movement as possible, but also were very strongly adhered to a set of rules. As time has gone on, we now have post-minimalism, which is to say that the music reflects the aesthetic of minimalism, but doesn't necessarily adhere as strictly to those rules. I'd make a decision as to how strict you'd like to be with your permutation, because there is also the possibility that you could take the ideas that are presented in the permutation and then adjust them, kind of trick your ear. I found right around the minute mark, I was kind of ready for something new. And if you want to be strict, then I would say maybe you can add in an additional instrument or two to kind of contrast texturally. If you don't want to be as strict, maybe you could even play with the idea of the harmony underneath. There's ways actually that you could, depending on what note you land on, you could reharmonize those different notes underneath. That would enable you to kind of keep the strictness you have with the permutation, but also keep it interesting by readjusting the harmonies underneath. Really beautiful idea though, love the composition, very, very cool. Next we have Melissa Unlu's Peace. Nice job, Melissa. It sounds really beautiful. You have a really nice melody there, and you've kind of elaborated it, and you've committed to it, which is really nice. Not a lot of beginner composers have the courage, really, to be able to take a small idea and stick to it. So the fact that you've done that is really, really great. And you've kind of brought it through all these different ideas. You brought it through different registers on the piano, which is excellent. Your chord progressions are solid. They're very standard, and they work beautifully. Kind of remind me of Soul Sister for some reason, if you know that song, which is great. So in terms of my suggestions, I think I would be aware of the time signature of your piece, because I'm hearing kind of a flip between maybe like a 3 sound and a 4 sound, and maybe that's deliberate, but I would just be aware of what the time signature is. So if it's bum ba da da dum bum da 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 dum da 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 dum da da dum ba da dum, or dum da 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 dum da 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 dum, whatever you have, I would suggest committing to it, just because flipping around back and forth is not necessarily a no-no, but it should be done deliberately. So if you want to have that deliberately, I'd say do it. If not, then I just pick the time signature and commit to it. And you can work with a metronome to make sure that whatever you're doing and writing in that spot commits to that. I would also recommend notating this out if you have the knowledge on how to notate, even shorthand. So what I've done with students who don't know how to write music fully fledged yet is just to keep their ideas organized. I've had them do shorthand. So they'll literally write out the letter names and write down the rhythmic values underneath. It's just a way of keeping your things organized, making sure that everything lines up properly to the bars. Other than that, I think there's an opportunity to expand your harmonic palette. Your melody is great, So maybe there's ways that you can expand it by using some open voicings instead of your closed voicings. There could be ways that you could reharmonize the melody as it goes, so you introduce chords that are not originally part of it. And that's just going to take a little bit more time, just learning some more music theory, learning about harmony. I'll attach some links in the description so that you can check them out and learn more about how to color your piece. But it's really beautiful. Keep up the great work. Next, we have a composition by Nandang. Cool. Short, sweet, and to the point. Really liked it. I like that you decided to try adding some acoustic instruments in there. They sounded real, and it was beautiful. It's really nice. There's things that are just so wonderful about having acoustic instruments as opposed to digital. There's lots of benefits to digital in the editing capabilities that we can do, but there's just something about the warmth and the humanness of having real instruments that is really just irreplaceable for me. So I love that you did that. I would recommend next time you record, making sure you track to a metronome. I know that sometimes we lose some of the life of the piece in terms of the ebb and flow, but it can be useful to track with a metronome for a while for early compositions because it'll help keep all of your instruments cohesive and just lined up more properly. So practice it with a metronome, or alternatively, if you don't want to record with a metronome because you're afraid you're going to lose some of the ebb and flow, practice with a metronome so that when you bring it to your recording session, you actually have that metronome kind of built into your head, so you can kind of have things slow down as you need to, but not have everything kind of fall apart when you're recording. I was ready to hear some bass. I think you could expand this composition, maybe include a bass in there, maybe some pizzicato strings, another upper instrument. You have kind of these darker instruments like this piano that you've used, and it sounded like maybe was it a mandolin maybe, or a ukulele? Something like that. But I think maybe you could use like a glockenspiel to kind of echo that melody line on the top, or add another melody line. There's definitely room for increasing the piece's length and adding some extra instrumentation to color it up. But overall, really nice work. Next, we have Nikolaus Chantz's, I probably didn't pronounce that right, sorry, called Agoraphobic Cactus. Nice. The title's really fitting, Agoraphobic Cactus. That's one thing that I think is really cool about titles, is that we have the power to kind of guide the listener's ear towards what we want them to hear. And with your title, I was immediately thinking, okay, I'm going to hear something kind of like maybe something out of a Super Mario game or something like in the desert maps. And your colors, the colors that you chose totally give the vibe of a cactus, which I think is great. So I like the surprise of the percussion in there. I like the choice of instrumentation you used. I also really thought your harmony is very interesting, like that you had this kind of like sus thing that never quite resolves, and it kind of kept me listening for more. I think on that point, something that would be really nice to add would be a bass line. And that bass line can be used in a way to kind of break up that repeating sus pattern. So you can keep your harmony there, But by having your bass line do different positions, different notes, it'll create a whole different context for that upper harmony. Something like that, it can just basically break it up and allow for more movement on the bottom if you want to retain the harmony on the top. I was ready to hear more. I think that piece could keep going, and maybe that's when you add the bass. Maybe you change it. I think you could use a B section, so you have this really stable A section that kind of layers on top. Once it's all layered up, I think it's time for a change. Add a different harmony, something that kind of pulls it away from that F major, F sus kind of thing. But overall, really loved it. Cool choice of instrumentation. Keep it going. Next we have Paco Altavida's Solitude. Wow, that was amazing. That was really great. You had such interesting choice of instrumentation. The textures that you had in the background were really, really incredible. Like lo-fi and acoustic, but also like unidentifiable. And that was what was really cool about it. Was it all fit the right atmosphere. I could totally hear that being in some kind of a video game, like Machinarium. I would definitely recommend you check out Thomas Dvorak. He did the Machinarium score if you don't know him already. Also, I'd recommend Olafur Arnalds. He's an excellent composer, kind of has similar aesthetics. Your colors were just really beautiful. You were doing lots of nuanced things with the piano. Like, I noticed you were tweaking things. You had some nice reverse effects that were coming in. The melody was beautiful when the cellos came in. I liked what you were doing with some of those odd effects. I think you really, really need to get a real player on this. You really need to get a real player, because the only thing for me that felt like inauthentic or felt like unrealistic was the cello. And I think if you get a real player on this, oh my gosh, it's going to breathe such life into your piece. It's going to be ridiculous. A friend or something like that, if you can't pay them for it. Just buy them a nice lunch or something, or just make it up to them in some way. But I think a real player would do so many wonders for this, and you'd be able to release this out, and you should release this out to the world, digital distribution, put it on Bandcamp or something like that. It's great. It would make a really, really good portfolio piece for a video game score if you're trying to get a score like that. Personally, I think I could also have heard maybe a bass clarinet in there. I know that's an odd, specific thing to say, but something about that dark color, I always think of bass clarinet. And on the second repeat, you have almost a direct repeat of your whole piece. Maybe instead of using a cello the second time, you could have used a bass clarinet, something to kind of vary it up. Might add an interesting color. But overall, it's a really excellent piece, very well produced. Definitely keep up the great work. Next we have a piece by Pani Kefrek, and she's performing it, so I'll just play the video. Yeah, that was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. It's very difficult to sing and play piano at the same time, so I applaud you for that, because that's not easy. And I like that you did certain things like, I was just thinking in my head as the piece was about a third of the way through, I'm like, oh, I hope she speeds up that rhythm. And you did, and it really broke up the two sections very nicely. It gave a little bit of excitement. It reminded me a little bit of Regina Spektor, if you know her music. I would definitely recommend you check it out if you don't. I think you'd really like her style. So, your voicings are very good. I thought it was an interesting choice to have your right hand doing the chords and the left hand doing the arpeggios. I think it was very cool. I think there's opportunities for you to take what you've got and kind of commit to the different styles even more. So, the beginning, maybe you can bring it up many octaves to give a little change in the register. So it's something like kind of cute and just like a lullaby almost. And then when you get to the next section, the kind of more energetic section, I think you should drop that pedal. I think you should be playing that staccato. Something that gives a little bit more energy, because when you have the pedal down the whole time, it's going to all kind of feel similar, especially if it's in the same register. So I'd say like pedal down for the beginning, drop the pedal, nice staccato notes for the middle section, so it can accompany your singing, because your singing is legato, so having staccato will just give a little bit more punctuation to the whole thing. I'd also learn some other voicings. Maybe some open voicings could go really well, and this is something I've talked about a lot before, but definitely knowing different voicings on the piano can really expand your vocabulary and your harmonies. So instead of these closed voicings all the time, we open it up, which means we take the middle voicing, we put that on the top, keep the bass on the bottom, and then so we'll have a root, fifth, and then the third way up on the top displaced. Creates a nice open voicing, and if you can't play it all at once, you can still arpeggiate it back and forth, which gives just a nice kind of different color. Beautiful work though, really nice job. And our final submission for part 3 comes from Philip Seltzinger. Cool, really nice, short, sweet, to the point. I like the style that you've got. It's kind of very soulful. Your use of voicings is really nice, kind of alternating between the different things. So there's something about your melody. It's interesting because the melody is super, like, very well written. It has a really nice flow to it. It almost feels like a bridge, actually, to me. And it's traditionally what we have is, in certain pop songs especially, verse, which is the storytelling element. We have the chorus, which is the everybody sing along. And we have the bridge, which is the part that leads a transition. And they all have very different feels to them. So the verse kind of doesn't necessarily have to be too memorable or melodic, but the chorus especially has to be very melodic. And we can rely on things like just repeating ideas over and over again. The bridge is the part that segues into something new. And for some reason, this one feels like a bridge to me. So maybe you could take some of the ideas that you have. I would say maybe write 2 more short little melodies like this and see if one of them sticks out to you more as like a hook for a piece. Like something like that. Basically just something that kind of has a very like shout feel, something that says like, listen to me, this is the melody. You can use that as a chorus. You could restructure this so that it works as a bridge. So you have ba-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, and then we lead into that spot, ba-da-ba-da-da-da-da-dum, or whatever. I'm just making up a melody, but you get the idea. Also, composing away from the piano or from your instrument can be really useful too, because it forces you to listen to your inner ear and not rely on the stuff that you know as a pianist. So I would say maybe step away and see if you can write the chorus just by vocalizing like I did. Once you've got it, bring it back to the piano, use your piano skills to harmonize it, to add proper voicings, etc. But really nice work. Really, really nice work. So that's going to do it for part 3. Part 4 will be coming out sometime next week, along with an announcement. Make sure you tune in for that announcement because there's some really, really important and also really exciting stuff going on. So, thanks for watching. But before the video ends, I just want to make one more announcement. I have decided to launch a solo Patreon for this channel. These composition submissions have been so much fun, it's been a blast doing them, and I'd love to be able to do them more often, maybe even on a monthly basis, but in order to do that, I need your help and support to make it happen. There's a bunch of incentives for those who can and choose to support me, such as MP3s every month of my music, live hangouts, Q&As, custom-made jingles, lots of other fun stuff. So I hope you'll check it out, the link is in the description and also in these cards. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.